My sister-in-law stole my breast milk because she couldn't produce enough, but she refused to ask for help, and she completely lost it when I put a lock on my freezer. My sister-in-law and I gave birth 3 weeks apart. Her name is Odette. And she married my husband's older brother about 5 years ago. We were never especially close, but we were always polite and civil during holidays and family gatherings. When we found out we were both pregnant at the same time, everyone said it must be fate and that our babies would grow up like siblings. I honestly thought maybe this shared experience would finally bring us closer together, but I couldn't have been more wrong. From the very beginning of our pregnancies, Odette turned everything into a quiet competition. She announced her pregnancy at my baby shower, claiming she simply couldn't wait any longer to share her news, even though the day was supposed to celebrate me. She complained when I chose a nursery theme that happened to be similar to hers, even though I had picked mine first. She accused me of copying her when my baby registry included some of the same items, as if pregnant women don't often choose the same popular products. I tried to ignore most of her comments because I didn't have the emotional energy to argue while growing an entire human being inside me. After we both gave birth, things became even more tense. Odette struggled immediately with breastfeeding. Her milk supply was low, and her son had trouble latching properly. The pediatrician suggested supplementing with formula to make sure the baby gained weight appropriately, but Odette refused without hesitation. She insisted formula was poison and said she would never feed her child anything artificial. She declared that breast milk was the only acceptable option and that she would make it work no matter what. Meanwhile, I experienced the complete opposite problem. My milk supply was abundant to the point of being overwhelming. I pumped constantly throughout the day and stored every extra ounce in my freezer at home. I had rows and rows of neatly labeled breast milk bags organized by date. I felt proud of how much I was able to provide and relieved knowing I would have a backup supply if I ever got sick or needed a break. During one family dinner, I casually mentioned my freezer stash, not thinking much of it. Odette asked how much milk I had stored, and I told her honestly that I probably had enough to feed my daughter for several weeks if necessary. After that comment, she went unusually quiet and quickly changed the subject. A few weeks later, my mother-in-law restarted her tradition of hosting Sunday family dinners so everyone could stay close and the cousins could bond. Every Sunday, my husband and I brought our daughter to his parents' house, and Odette and her husband brought their son as well. During those dinners, I began noticing that Odette frequently disappeared into the kitchen. She always had an excuse, saying she needed water, needed to check on something, or left an item in her diaper bag. I didn't question it at first, but soon after those dinners began again, I started noticing something strange at home. My freezer stash was shrinking in a way that didn't make sense. I am very particular about tracking how much I pump because I like knowing exactly how much my daughter drinks each day. Every single bag was dated and stacked carefully, and I mentally kept count of everything. Every Monday morning after Sunday dinner at my in-laws' house, I would open my freezer and feel a strange sense of confusion because there would be fewer bags than I remembered. At first, I assumed I had miscounted. Sleep deprivation can make anyone doubt themselves. Then I wondered if my husband had used some milk without telling me, but he swore he hadn't touched the freezer stash. I even started questioning my own memory, thinking maybe I was imagining things, but the pattern continued. 5 or 6 bags would disappear at a time, and it only ever happened after Sunday dinners. I knew how much my daughter consumed daily. I knew how much I pumped, and no matter how I calculated it, the numbers were off. The math simply refused to add up. I felt anxious and unsettled, like something was happening behind my back. The next Sunday, I pretended to have a splitting headache and told my husband to go to dinner without me. I asked him quietly to keep an eye on Odette and notice if she behaved strangely. When he came home later that evening, he said she seemed oddly disappointed that I wasn't there. He said she asked multiple times when I would feel better and whether I planned to attend the following week. He also noticed she went into the kitchen several times, but he didn't see anything obviously suspicious. The following Sunday, I decided to go in person and watch more carefully. During dinner, I saw Odette pick up her large diaper bag and walk into the kitchen again. I waited several minutes before following her quietly so I wouldn't raise suspicion. When I reached the kitchen, she wasn't there. I heard a faint noise coming from the garage, which is where my in-laws kept a second refrigerator. I walked toward the sound, and that is when I saw her. Her diaper bag was open on the concrete floor, and she was placing my clearly labeled breast milk bags into it one by one. My heart started pounding in my chest. I stood in the doorway and asked her calmly what she was doing. She jumped violently and dropped one of the frozen bags onto the floor. She immediately started saying it wasn't what it looked like. I asked her what exactly it looked like to her because from where I was standing, it looked like she was stealing milk I had pumped for my daughter. She burst into tears almost instantly and said she wasn't stealing. She insisted she was borrowing it and that she intended to replace every single bag once her supply improved. She said her son desperately needed breast milk and she couldn't produce enough. She said she felt trapped and ashamed and didn't know what else to do. I asked her why she hadn't simply asked me directly for help. She admitted she was embarrassed and couldn't stand the thought of anyone knowing she wasn't able to feed her baby properly. She said she figured I had so much stored that I wouldn't even notice a few missing bags. I told her I had noticed weeks ago and had started questioning my own sanity because of it. I explained firmly that taking something without permission was not borrowing, it was stealing. She begged me not to tell anyone, saying her husband would be furious and my mother-in-law would judge her harshly. She said this would destroy her image within the family. I told her she should have thought about that before taking something that didn't belong to her. I left her standing there and returned to the dinner table. I didn't expose her that night because I needed time to calm down and think clearly. The following morning, I drove to the hardware store and bought a heavy-duty lock for my freezer, one that required a physical key. I installed it myself and kept the key hidden where only I could access it. The next Sunday, Odette arrived with her usual oversized diaper bag and acted completely normal. About an hour into dinner, she slipped away toward the kitchen again. A few minutes later, she returned looking confused, then she disappeared once more and came back looking visibly panicked. Later that evening, she texted me from the bathroom saying she needed to speak with me privately before we left. After everyone began saying their goodbyes, I told her I would walk her to her car. Once outside, with her husband buckling their son into his car seat, she broke down crying and apologized repeatedly. She admitted she knew what she had done was wrong and said she was ready to get help and stop pretending everything was perfect. I told her I appreciated her apology but needed time to process everything. She nodded and drove away looking defeated. That night, my husband and I stayed up for hours discussing what to do. He believed his brother deserved to know the truth because Odette was clearly struggling emotionally. I agreed, but wanted to approach the situation carefully so we didn't cause further damage. We decided I would contact Odette the next morning and offer to help her find professional support if she refused or continued lying. Then we would involve her husband ourselves the next morning. I texted Odette and asked her directly if she was truly serious about getting help. She responded almost immediately and said yes. She admitted she was exhausted from pretending and scared of failing as a mother. I sent her the contact details of a lactation consultant my pediatrician highly recommended. Her name was Madison, and she had helped several women I knew. Odette scheduled an appointment for Thursday afternoon and asked if I would come with her for support. I agreed because I wanted to make sure she actually followed through and because part of me genuinely wanted her situation to improve. When Thursday arrived, I met her at the consultant's office. Madison welcomed us warmly and guided us into a private room where Odette explained everything, including the part about stealing my milk. I expected judgment or shock, but Madison remained calm and professional. She asked detailed questions about feeding schedules, pumping frequency, hydration, stress levels, and the baby's weight gain. She examined Odette gently and observed her attempting to nurse her son. She confirmed the milk supply was low and that the baby's latch needed adjustment. But she also explained there were practical steps to improve both issues. She discussed structured pumping routines, proper flange sizing, hydration, rest, and even certain supplements that might help. She demonstrated new positioning techniques to improve the latch. Odette listened carefully and took notes on her phone as if she were studying for an exam. I could see visible relief washing over her as she realized there were solutions beyond silently suffering. Then Madison carefully brought up the topic of supplementing with formula. She showed a growth chart and explained that while the baby was gaining weight, it was slower than ideal. She emphasized that nutrition and growth were the ultimate priorities, not pride. Odette's eyes filled with tears, but instead of becoming defensive, she asked thoughtful questions about different formula options and how to combine them safely with breast milk. Madison reassured her that using formula did not make her a failure and that many mothers successfully combine feeding methods. After the appointment, we sat in our cars in the parking lot while the baby slept, and I told Odette that if she needed donated milk, I would provide it openly and safely, but only if there was complete honesty. Moving forward, no more sneaking, no more lies. She apologized sincerely again and admitted that competition and pride had clouded her judgment for months. She said she had been trying so hard to appear perfect that she nearly harmed her own child's health. Over the next several weeks, she followed Madison's plan closely. She pumped on schedule, practiced better latch techniques, stayed hydrated, and slowly introduced formula alongside both her own milk and the milk I donated. Her son began gaining weight more steadily, and she started sleeping better because she wasn't constantly panicking about supply. 2 days after our appointment, my mother-in-law called me sounding concerned because Odette's husband had confessed everything to her after Odette finally came clean. I took a deep breath and explained the situation calmly, including the theft, the lock, and the agreement we had reached to move forward with professional help. My mother-in-law was quiet for a long moment before saying she wished Odette had felt safe enough to ask for support instead of resorting to stealing. The following Sunday dinner felt tense at first because everyone sensed something had happened. But my mother-in-law stood up during the meal and gently spoke about how families should support each other instead of competing. She said asking for help was a sign of strength, not weakness. Odette stood up shortly after and apologized to everyone for hiding her struggles and making poor choices. She didn't share every detail, but she admitted she had been overwhelmed and was now receiving help. Instead of anger, she received empathy. My father-in-law squeezed her hand, and her husband wrapped his arm around her shoulders. The tension in the room slowly dissolved. Over the next month, Odette and I began attending a mother support group together every Tuesday evening at the community center. The group was led by a woman named Brooke Flynn, and during the first meeting, I was shocked by how many women openly discuss struggles with breastfeeding, postpartum emotions, relationship stress, and exhaustion. Hearing others speak honestly seemed to free Odette from the belief that she was alone in her struggles. She eventually shared her own story about stealing my milk and how admitting the truth changed everything. Several women thanked her afterward for her bravery. As the weeks passed, our relationship shifted naturally from rivalry to genuine friendship. We began meeting at the park with our babies, spreading blankets under trees while they played beside each other. We talked about sleep schedules, teething, solid foods, and everything in between without comparing or competing. Sunday dinners gradually became something I looked forward to rather than dreaded. Months later, both babies were thriving. Odette's son was healthy and gaining weight appropriately, and she carried herself with a confidence that came from honesty rather than perfection. What began as betrayal slowly transformed into forgiveness, growth, stronger boundaries, and deeper family connection. And looking back, I realized that the freezer lock, as dramatic as it felt at the time, had ultimately unlocked something far more important. It forced truth into the open, broke unhealthy competition, and allowed healing to begin where pride once stood.